You're good to go, buddy, whenever you want.
All right. Thank you, Darren. Good evening, and thank you all for being here. I will call this hearing to order. This is a reconvening of the hearing that began on the 12th of December. Again, look to the board. Seems to me there's a quorum, but I would entertain a motion to that extent. So moved. Second. Discussion. All in favor? We have a quorum. What transpired prior to tonight? We had the hearing on December the 12th. We heard from the library. We heard from a Historic Preservation Commission. We heard from members of the public. It then became our turn to make a decision. We got far along. We realized that we did not feel like we had the facts from the the October 15th meeting of the Historic Preservation Committee. So we remanded this to them with some pretty direct, that the response to this should be to review the minutes and recording of the last meeting, that is on the 15th of October, and create written findings based on the decision that had already been made. That is from what happened that night. Not a redo, but written of what had happened that night. A record of discussion, and we received that. And so tonight, what's going to happen is, as we resume, we will hear from the library with respect to the finding of facts from the Historic Preservation Commission, and then we will resume our deliberation.
Thank you. Before I get into our response, I wanted to clarify. I had a question. We were not a contributing property previously. Is that true? Because it's my understanding that they voted to make the library a contributing property at their October meeting.
I wish the CEO were here. He said at the meeting that you were contributing property. We're here as a zoning board of appeals to hear your, I'm sorry.
Okay, because it's not in their minutes. It's supposed to say that they voted to make us a contributing property, because if we are a contributing property, it's different based on their ordinance, but I just wanted to put that out there, that it's not very clear.
Derek, would you like to take a cut at whether or not the library is contributing property? Or not?
I believe it is. What's the definition of contributing property to the district, right? I believe it is. But really, that's up to this board to decide too, but I don't know why it wouldn't be.
I think it's just sort of a red herring. This board, the zoning board, designated it as a contributing property. And there was some pushback, but it is my understanding, I think I have to ask our attorney.
Based on what we had been.
Yeah.
Right.
I think our attorney was going to be asked some piece of if she had been asked to help with that decision. I thought she had.
She had.
So.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. So their statement of facts is mostly opinions, and a lot of the data that they have in their statement of fact is not true. And I could go by, I'm not going to go through line by line with their statement of facts here, but starting with number 14, the denial of our plan is based on the concept of viewscape, and cleared that alterations should enhance the visual nature of the district as a whole. We believe that this does enhance the nature of the district. Currently, the library landscaping is a patch of mud next to the stairs and a holly bush, and the lawn in front facing State Street is in poor health. The water water's not retained in that lawn, and those two memorial trees are dying as a result of it. And so this plan is intended to enhance the library landscape by creating a retaining wall that will retain the water and allow us to flatten that section to improve the life of the existing trees and give other plants a chance to thrive. By addressing the issue of the water retention, this also supports the goal in the town's comprehensive plan from 2024 that action should be taken to protect historic and archaeological sites from threats of climate change, such as erosion. On number 15, they have some opinions about the native landscape design. And actually, if we look back at number 10, it says Article 9 provides an exception for lawn and garden objects and landscaping, including planting sculptures, walkways, or walls that are 2 feet or shorter, which ours is, and do not require a historic preservation certificate. However, it does not exempt walkways from the viewscape of the properties. So really, we're only talking about the walkways, the way I read this. But just to put it on record, the commentary on the landscape is misinformed. The CHPC does not have the expertise to back up their claims on this matter. To call the plan haphazardly arranged suggests the plan is not carefully designed. We've hired one of the leading professional experts in native landscapes to design the plan. And the goal of this project is to educate the public on the importance of native gardens and the difference in what we consider traditional gardens. And so our first lesson is to understand that native plants require closer plantings and more species because they're not cultivated like the plants that we have in our gardens now. This design is thoughtfully planned, so something will be in bloom throughout the year into the winter, which is in fact one of the concerns that one of the members of the CHPC had in their original statement. To call the design being unlike anything else ignores the facts there are full gardens within many large plants throughout the historic district, including buildings close to the library at 13 and 29 School Street. And the issue complaining about large trees is just nonsensical. Castine prides itself with large trees. Look around the square, it's full of large trees. And so this again is meant to provide a canopy for the library as the climate warms. And again, these plants were picked out by a landscape designer who knows the specific space needs for these plants. And a native garden, by definition, is compatible with the viewscape because the plants are those that come from the landscape. We're not planting palm trees or cactus, but plants that come from and belong in Maine. So there's multiple references to a serpentine walkway. There's no definition of what this means in the context. There's no reference to rules in the ordinance that says all walkways must be straight. And in fact, the committee recently approved a brick path for the Pentagoet, which could be considered even more serpentine than our path. In number 16 and 17, they claim that the building is stucco. Only the addition is stucco. The building itself is brick and granite. The roof is red terracotta tile and chimney is red brick. So for them to claim that the brick doesn't go with our building doesn't really make a lot of sense because our brick, our chimney's brick and our terracotta tile is red brick. So the brick that will be next to the original portion of the building and the red brick will be different enough from the original building so it conforms with the directives of their historic preservation design manual. And again, they cite no rules or accepted design rules that say this kind of building can have brick, this kind of building cannot. Red brick is very compatible with the roof and the chimney of our building. They make the statement that the red brick is incongruous with the stucco, but the brick will be congruous with other brick paths within the historic district, including the path recently approved by the same committee for the Pentagoet, a building constructed with wood. Again, there's no rules about which kind of buildings can have brick and which cannot. And in fact, I think that if we were to propose a stone path, they would tell us it was incongruous with the brick paths around the district. So we believe that this plan is going to enhance and preserve the historic architectural character of the structure and is visually compatible with the viewscape. And we ask that you reject their denial and allow us to move forward with this project.
Either one of you all have anything to add?
She speaks for me.
Are there comments that the board has of the library? Questions? Hearing none, then
Well, no, sorry about it. I'm just forming a thought. So I don't have it directly in front of me, but when I was reviewing the historic preservation requirements, one of the piece for the viewscape is that everything they're doing is easily reversible, right? To avoid needing even a historic preservation certificate.
Yeah,
Could you rip all this out?
absolutely. It's not going to impact the structure. It's we're building a garden.
Any other questions? Then we shall resume our deliberation. I remind my fellow board members that this is a de novo hearing, which means that we can rely on and listen to all the things that have been put together. But in fact, we are to come up with a decision of our own. At this point, are there points that anyone would like to make? I have a couple, but I don't know. Impose.
Well,
Go ahead.
first, I guess, have we resolved the contributing property question?
It's a contributor.
It's, yeah. Okay, go ahead, Bobby.
I came away, I'm puzzled by a series of things, and I don't mean to bore folks with it, but I just provide. On the meeting on January 10th. There was a question, it was called into question whether or not there was standing on the part of the library. That was never taken up. But the point was made that it was owned by the town inhabitants and successors. That puzzled me. These are just puzzlements because in fact, this plan, as I recall, was overwhelmingly approved at a town meeting. At the meeting on the 10th, there were, in coming up with statements of fact, finding of facts, there were references to the library comments at the appeal hearing. But as of 10:15, when that meeting happened, there wasn't any appeal. So that we said, go back and work on what you had at the time. So that was a puzzlement. At the meeting on the 10th, I noted that there was extensive use of the design manual. And as I reviewed twice, the meeting on the 15th of October, that was not in evidence. There were a couple of things that probably there's a big thing about consistency. One of them was consistency with Beaux-Arts, and interestingly, it's both Roman and Greek classicism, but also is combined with Italian and French Renaissance, and it's known for its sort of non-conformity. So I was interested in the push for some kind of consistency, consistent with the building features of stucco. But as you point out, prior to 2012, there wasn't any stucco in the original. While it was not red brick, the granite and block was the original. There were references also in the findings to 11 large plantings crammed into a limited space, which with a cluttered appearance. And having wandered around the historic district, I would say, I would have to opine that there are many places where there are lots of plants that gather together, maybe in close proximity. And in the eyes of the owners, they seem quite acceptable, and beside which plantings are not in the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission. Then there was many points about, you're not supposed to be distinguishable, when in fact the design manual reads, when they're talking about new things, this new construction should also be easily distinguished from the old. That is, a casual observer should be able to easily tell that the addition is a later construction, for example. The new construction should never be designed to look as though it was built in an earlier time period in an attempt to blend in. So that too was a piece of puzzlement for me. And I'm almost finished this litany, but if I look at the recording of the October 15th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, and not to be a twit, but at minute 31:45 seconds, a board member said, and I quote, "For me, the most difficult part of this entire project is the introduction of a stone wall on School and Court Streets," end quote. At the meeting on January 10th, at hour 1:31, 2nd, 51. The quote is, "What bothers me most about this project is building a permanent stone wall facing public property, separating the contributing property from the street." End quote. And what's puzzling is what bothers the speaker most about the entire project is not in the purview of the Historical Preservation Commission. And so I would just offer my fellow board members, and I'm subject to bricks and arrows, that we should remember that the town voted overwhelmingly to allow this to go forward. That the responses that I saw were not all from the 15th of October, but had bled into a later time period. And so the questions on inconsistencies, but the main focus seems to be plantings and the wall. And they're not in the purview. And so to me, the question whittles down to, and maybe in my simplistic mind, is a serpentine sidewalk so offensive that this should be denied? To me, if you ask me to summarize what the question before us is, that's the way I would summarize.
Thanks, summary.
Well, you have a thought, a reaction,
I just, you took the words right out of my mouth. So if you listen to the meeting, I was almost gonna put a stopwatch on how much time was spent in the October meeting on the issue of stone wall and plants. Overwhelmingly, that seemed to be the problem. When it was clear that the ordinance said plants and stone walls are okay, we've now spent an awful lot of time trying to justify a bad decision. And I'm saying,
well, we're free to make our own decision, which is why we're here. And so if you want to, or Justin, you have, I don't want to.
Just
Pat,
a question. I wasn't at the meeting where the town voted to approve the project. Was everything presented to the town at that time?
the person was there, there was a presentation.
I
And
mean, the design and the budget and all that was,
that's what the town voted.
We had pamphlets available for the town.
right. I just had one, after going through this and I'm thinking, and if it's approved, I just want to make this comment that I thought, if my very basic math is correct, the project runs about $1,000 a square foot. And for that, I would hope to look at a design and say, wow, that's something really special. And I didn't get that. I got some of the, and I didn't understand the native planting, you know, and that. So, but that was just my initial impression that this is it's a significant amount of money for a project, and I think the design should merit that expense.
But that's not the issue before the board.
I
take your point, it's an important point, but that's ours is.
And I appreciate the clarification.
I largely, would echo you, Bobby, though I don't. I think that the CHP does have a point that we need to at least decide the viewscape issue. As I understand, am I wrong there?
We only need to decide that issue if we decide we want to decide that issue. We have to look at the facts and say, what is this, what hangs in the balance? And we have all the, I'm not pushing back on it, I'm just saying, to us, I have a much narrower mindset, and mine came down to, it was
I've done
all
a
about
lot of
serpentine.
research on the whole word subjectivity. And the state of Virginia has a long caution as they define the viewscape on the whole issue of subjectivity. The town of Waterville has a long statement on subjectivity. It is a slippery slope. And frankly, given the early dialogue about this project, I have not seen much objectivity in that.
But I'm sorry, we're not here to, I don't think, to critique either personal views or And I think each is entitled to his or her own. I think the question for us is, do we think that what has been put out, which is a serpentine sidewalk, is sufficient to turn that turn down this appeal? My judgment would be no. I'm sure I made that clear, but viewscapes are important. Viewscapes are subjective.
I'm saying,
Well, I mean, I would agree completely with I think this comes down in many ways to an idea of, or a contention of jurisdiction. And whether the Historic Preservation Commission has jurisdiction over the things that they are using to deny and want to oppose this project. And, you know, if we take the landscaping and the wall out of it, then I would agree with you that I don't think the wall is grounds enough to deny this.
but whoever drafted this in 2010 was very specific. They amended the rules and in Article 9.3, and they exempted walls in that. So certainly the intent of that amendment was to exempt walls and, you know, within reason and pathways. To supplement or to challenge that fairly clear intent with a very strange as the word viewscape is so, I mean, they just don't match each other. So if it wasn't for 9.3, this would be a harder decision, but it's very specific in the ordinance that that wall and that walkway are not subject to the review that it got.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I chime in for a second?
Please.
Okay, I just want to kind of help direct the decision making because while you have de novo review of the issue, the decision that you're reviewing, and you have the findings that were provided, the conclusion of that decision is that the design does not meet Article 12.2.1. So I believe you can narrow your decision on whether this board believes that the design meets that section of the ordinance, because by finding that it doesn't meet that, we can assume that the Historic Preservation Board found that it met everything else. And there's no need to look at all the other standards. So you're looking at whether it meets 12.2.1, but you're also looking at those elements of the design that are within the jurisdiction of the statute, which is really only the sidewalk because plantings and landscape and the 2-foot wall are not included. So, and that does have the landscape language, and I agree that that's pretty subjective and not ideal for an ordinance, but I think to narrow your discussion, that's really what you're focused on, that 12.2.1.
So when it comes to a decision.
And I'm happy to read, I have it in front of me, I'm happy to read it if you don't have it in front of you.
Yeah. So what you're advising is that while we have talked about what seems to be the focal points, our ultimate decision has to be based upon 12.2.1.
Correct.
If we were to find the other.
Right. Whether the sidewalk meets the requirement of 12.2.1.
Well, we're just talking about the walkway.
Correct.
Whether it's compatible with the use of.
That is 12.2.1, right? Well, to get discussion, I would move, as I've indicated, that based upon 12.2.1 and what we see to be the facts, that in fact, we uphold the appeal of the library, of the decision of the Castine Historical Preservation Committee. That would be my motion.
I would second that motion.
Could I help with that language a little bit? sorry, with it, with it.
All might be great.
Well, just with a de novo review, I just want to make sure that you're actually making your own independent finding and not, so
Okay,
your finding would be that the aspects of the project within your purview comply with the requirements of 12.2.1, and therefore you would grant the appeal.
that's precisely what I intended to say. I just, thank you.
That happened to me at the last meeting, I did the same thing.
So as modified by the Castine council, that's the motion on the table and seconded. Is there discussion?
I second that
Yeah, is there discussion?
discussion.
Mark,
I'm just thinking through,
okay, take
I'm
your time.
reading both aspects of it. It's very, very little of either of these is about the sidewalk itself. The historic preservation, it mostly focuses on plantings, which are not part of the sidewalk. And then the library response, a lot of it is about the plantings, because they're responding to the historic preservation committee.
We got stuff on the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
no, it's at 20.3, Serpentine walkway, but I don't know. I think the fact that this has been approved for the Patagoet, which a similar pathway is, I don't see an issue with it.
So there's motion made and seconded. Is there other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. We will adjourn this hearing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to move.